Hey there, I'm Kevin Skinner. I'm the student pastor here at First Baptist Watauga. I would invite for you to join our student ministry every Wednesday night in person at 6 p.m. for some games and for our midweek student ministry worship service. Our student ministry has a simple vision. Understanding that Jesus is the difference in our lives, we want to live the difference, share the difference, and make a difference. And I would invite you to join us in that vision. Now, stick around, and I hope that you're encouraged by this recent midweek message.
All right, so as we start out tonight, let me start with a question. Who in here is excited about growing up and becoming an adult one day? Anybody? Anybody? You're like, man, I can't wait till that day that I grow up. You're ready? Like, I am ready. All right. All right, so there was a time when I was like Jonathan. Not too many of you raised your hand. There was a time in my life when I was like Jonathan, where I was looking ahead to the day that I got to become an adult. I was looking forward to that time that I would be out on my own, where, you know, my parents wouldn't be in charge of me anymore. I would get to be in charge of me, right? And then I became an adult. I grew up, and the question I had was, is this it? Like, don't get me wrong. I love my life. I love my wife and my children. I love the life that God has blessed me with. But when you become an adult, it is not the freedom that you might think it is when you are a child, right? When you picture adulthood and you're thinking, man, I'll be able to just do whatever I want, go wherever I want, right? No, that's not true, right? You still have a schedule because you have to work, right? That house that you want, the place of your own that you may want, right? You have to pay for that, and so you have to work. The really nice car that you can't afford right now as a kid that you want one day, you have to work for that. You have to pay for that, right? And then if you have kids, all of a sudden you become responsible for other human beings, right? That is a big thing, right? And so don't get me wrong, I love my life, I love my family, I love what God has blessed me with, but it certainly is not what I had in mind as a child when I thought about, I'm just going to go be out on my own and be free, right? Adulthood has some responsibilities to it. And so if you go into adulthood without being prepared for the reality of adulthood, you might get to it and think, is this it? Is this what I was wanting? Right? Is this what I was hoping for? Right? You're thinking you've got the hard life right now because, man, school and STAR tests and all of that, man, it's so hard. You ain't seen nothing yet, all right? You got the easy life right now. Enjoy your childhood because when you become an adult, all the responsibility is on you. And if you don't take that responsibility, then you're going to end up living a sad life, all right? So you might ask that question, though, if you're not prepared for the reality of adulthood, you might ask that question, is this it? Right? So we are in a series right now titled, Is This It? As we're walking through the book of Ecclesiastes, and Nathan did a great job the last couple of weeks kicking off this series for us, but we're going to continue this series tonight. Let me give you a refresher. The book of Ecclesiastes was written by a man named Solomon. Solomon was the son of King David, and he also was King Solomon. All right, and so what we've seen so far, he has kind of looked out at his life, looked out at everything that he has done, looked at his work, looked at what he's accomplished, looked at what he's gained, and he's kind of asked this question, is this it? Right? He says absolute futility, or in other versions it says meaningless, right? Meaningless. But he's kind of looking out at everything saying, is this it? Is this really all there is? I mean, he's gained everything, and yet he's like, is this it? There's got to be something more. So if you have your Bibles, you can turn with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. If you don't have a Bible, that's okay. It's going to be up on the screen. Or you can pull out your phone and go to Ecclesiastes in the Bible app. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. We're going to look at verses 1 through 15 today. Now, as you're turning there, let me give you an overarching truth to remember. Now, this is, Nathan did not say this the last couple of weeks, but I'm pulling from an essence of what he said to us for the last couple of weeks to give you an overarching truth for this series, all right? So let's put that up there. If the pursuit of your life is simply the things of this life, then yes, this is it. But if your pursuit is Jesus and the things of eternity, then no, this is not it. All right? If you are only pursuing the things of this life and you ask that question, is this it? Then the answer will be yes. If you're only pursuing the things of this life, then yes, this is it for you. But if you will pursue Jesus and the things of eternity, then no, this is not it. Understand, God has more for you than this life. God has more for you. That's why when we look to the New Testament, we see the followers of Christ willing to suffer and at times even willing to die for the sake of Christ because they knew this truth that in Jesus, this is not it. This life is not it. They knew that this world that we are living in is not what they were living for, right? This world, when you are living for Christ, the world that you are living in is not what you are living for. And so the followers of Christ were willing to suffer. They were willing to die because they knew that this isn't it. All right, but let's take a look at what Solomon has to say in our passage tonight. Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 15 says, "There is an occasion for everything and a time for every activity under heaven, a time to give birth and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to avoid embracing, a time to search and a time to count as lost, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What does the worker gain from his struggles? I have seen the task that God has given the children of Adam to keep them occupied. He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has also put eternity in their hearts, but no one can discover the work God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and enjoy the good life. It is also the gift of God whenever anyone eats, drinks, and enjoys all his efforts. I know that everything God does will last forever. There is no adding to it or taking from it. God works so that people will be in awe of him. Whatever is has already been, and whatever will be already is. However, God seeks justice for the persecuted. As we see Solomon start this passage out, Solomon starts out by talking about different seasons. All right, so we're going to pause right here, and we're going to play a little game called 'Tis the Season to Be Jolly, Even Though My Name's Not Holly. Wait, it's not even Christmas, is it? All right, so here's a... Did y'all like that name? Yeah. All right, so I'm going to show you different seasons on the screen, and just shout out what season this is, all right? Winter, all right, good job. Fall. Football season, all right? Yeah, a little different, all right? Summer, spring, baseball season, seasonal. You know, a different kind of season, kind of putting your mind in somewhere else. All right, so those are definitely different type of seasons that we recognize in this world, all right? And so Solomon is talking about these different seasons of life. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to tear, a time to sow, a time to keep, a time to throw away. Solomon is talking about all of these different seasons that we might experience in this life, all right? So let me give you our first important truth tonight. you will face different seasons in this life. You will face different seasons in this life. Now, sometimes those seasons that you face are going to be good seasons. All right, so whether my daughter wants me to do this or not, today is her 13th birthday. Sorry, Emily. All right, so today is my daughter's 13th birthday, and I can remember 13 years ago how excited Sarah and I were as we were preparing for Emily to enter into this world, right? We were about to become parents. We were going to have a daughter. Our lives were about to change, and we couldn't be more excited, right? And because of Facebook gives you memories. You can look back at your previous posts from previous years. And so because of Facebook memories, I have been able to be reminded every year just how annoying I was leading up to Emily's birth. Literally almost every day or every other day, I was posting a countdown on my Facebook wall as we approached her birth. Like, only 7 more days until Emily is going to be born. Only 4 more days until Emily was going to be born. But I really started out at like day 25, right? So it was really annoying. I'm sure a lot of people wanted to unfollow me, but that wasn't an option at that time. All right? So that was, as I look back and I think about Emily being born, that was a good season in this life. So sometimes the seasons that we go through are going to be good seasons. Sometimes we're going to go through hard seasons. So when I was 16 years old, I was sitting on my couch at home watching TV. School was about to start. My parents were both teachers, and my parents had already started back to work for in-service or whatever you have to do leading up to school, right? And so they had already gone back to work. My sister and I, we were home alone watching TV, and the phone rang, and I answered the phone, and it was my mom telling me that my grandpa had passed away. And this was completely unexpected. He wasn't in the hospital. He wasn't sick that we were aware of. He just had a massive heart attack and died. And so hearing that news, of course, man, was very hard. It was very difficult to hear. And walking through those next several days and weeks after my grandpa, who I had known for 16 years of my life, who I was very close to. They owned a house right across the street from us. And so I was very close to him. So when he passed away, right, this was a hard season to go through. So sometimes we go through good seasons. Sometimes we go through hard seasons. Sometimes the seasons that we go through are going to be joyful seasons. Now, if we think about sports, which I threw in a couple of sports seasons in there. If we think about sports, college basketball season just ended on Monday night. All right, and so for the first time ever in history, Baylor University won the NCAA basketball championship. All right, and so of course when they win, immediate joy, right? All of the fans of Baylor are cheering. The coaches are going crazy. The players are going crazy. Confetti's falling from the ceiling, right? There is immediate joy when Baylor wins the national championship game. For them, it was a season of joy, right? But there's 2 teams that were playing, right? So sometimes we have a season of joy. Sometimes we have a season of sorrow. The other team that was playing was Gonzaga. Gonzaga had a perfect season up till that point. They had not lost a game yet until they played Baylor in the championship game. And when they were playing their most important game of the season, Gonzaga lost. And so immediately for them, while Baylor is cheering, while they're having this season of joy, immediately for Gonzaga, it's a season of sorrow. Immediately, their players are crying, right? They are very upset that they just lost this game, this very important game. So sometimes we have seasons of good seasons. Sometimes we have hard seasons. Sometimes we have seasons of joy. And sometimes we have seasons of sorrow. The reality is that you're going to face different seasons in this life. And as you look at your life right now, you may say, yeah, I'm in a good season right now. Or maybe you might look at what's going on in your life and you might say, man, I'm going through a hard season right now. Or you're in a joyful season right now. Man, things are going your way. It is a season of joy for you. Or man, there's some sad stuff going on in your life right now, and you just feel like you're in a season of sorrow. The reality is in this life, you're going to face different seasons. All right, we will face different seasons. But I want you to hear this truth. Regardless of the season that we might be going through, we can still have joy. Regardless of the season that we might be going through, we can still have joy. Certainly we're going to have joy in the good seasons and in the joyful seasons, but we can also have joy in the hard seasons and in the sorrowful seasons. But how? How can we still have joy? So as we look at this passage, we see it broken out into kind of two sections. The first 8 verses, we see Solomon just talking about all of these different seasons of life. But then when we get into the second section, we see where Solomon's focus is. Solomon's focus is on God. In fact, we see him say the name God at least 6 times, maybe more, but at least 6 times in those next verses from verse 9 to 15. So we see where Solomon's focus is. He talks about all the seasons, but where his focus is on God. So let me answer that question. How can we still have joy in the midst of hard seasons, in the midst of sorrowful seasons? And the answer is in our focus. All right, we can still have joy in all seasons if we don't focus on the season, but if we focus on God. So that brings us to our next important truth. In all seasons, focus on God. In all seasons of your life. It doesn't matter what you're going through. Even if you are in a season of joy, understand your joy should not be coming from the season that you're in. And when you're in a season of sorrow, your joy is not going to come from the season you're in. Your joy in every season should come from the Lord. In all seasons, we need to focus on God. So let me pull a couple of truths out from this passage. In verse 11, he says, He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has made everything appropriate in its time. All right, so in other words, God knows what he's doing. All right, simply put, he has made everything appropriate this time. God knows what he's doing, because here's the beauty of God. God is above time and outside of time. God can look at time from the beginning to the end, and he knows exactly what season needs to go where. God knows when seasons are appropriate for this world and for our lives. Now, that doesn't mean that we always understand the seasons that we're going through. It doesn't mean that they're always enjoyable seasons. But here's the reality. If God knows what he's doing, if he has made everything appropriate in its time, then we can trust him. We can trust God even in the harder seasons, even in the more sorrowful seasons, we can still trust God. And so instead of focusing on the seasons, we put our focus on God because we can trust God in the midst of every season. So God knows what he's doing. Let's jump to verse 13. We read, It is also the gift of God whenever anyone eats, drinks, and enjoys all his efforts. You know, one of the reasons that we don't experience joy in every season of life is it's not just because we don't focus on God, right? That's the primary thing. We need to focus on God. But one of the reasons why we don't have joy in every season of life is because we take for granted the little gifts that God has given us. God has blessed us in so many ways. God has given us many blessings. There's an old song that we used to sing. It says, count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. One of the things we need to do is to remind ourselves of the gifts that God has given to us. And so we read in here, right? It's also the gift of God whenever anyone eats, drinks, and enjoys all his efforts. Solomon reminds us, if you ate today, that's a blessing, right? There are some that did not. We've got 2 children adopted through Compassion International in Managua, Nicaragua, and if you went through the Compassion experience last year, you know that what they have to eat is very minimal. And so our desire through adopting them through Compassion International is that we would be able to provide that gift of food to them. Right? If you ate today, you have been blessed. You have received a gift from God. If you drank today, you have received a gift from God. There are countries around the world that don't even have clean drinking water. And yet we've got bottled water over here, right? I see some on the floor, right? If you drank today, you've received a gift from God. If you lived today, if you breathed today, if you went to work or went to school today, you received a gift from God. I think many times we take for granted these little gifts that God has given us. And so in these hard times, we're not focusing on God, and we aren't rejoicing in all of these smaller gifts that God has given to us. And so we place our focus on the season instead of on God, and we miss out on the joy that we can have in God. So in difficult times, we don't need to remind God of what he should have done for us. We don't need to remind God of what we wanted. We need to remind ourselves of what God has already given to us. We need to remind ourselves of the gifts that God has already given to us. And the greatest gift that he has given to us is Jesus. Right? The greatest gift. If you have received Jesus into your life, then you have received the greatest gift of all. You have received God himself, because Jesus is God the Son. And so the greatest gift that God has given to us is himself. He has given us Jesus Christ. And so if we want to have joy in every season, it's not going to be by focusing on the seasons. It's going to be by focusing on God. It's going to be by focusing on Jesus Christ. He is the one that's going to get us through every single season. He is our hope and our joy in every single season of life. And so my desire for you is that you would not look to the seasons to find your hope, but that you would look to Jesus. And if you have never given your life to Christ, then that's the first step you need to take, because you can't look to Jesus for your hope in the midst of every season until you look to Jesus for your salvation, until you allow him to be the Lord of your life. He loves you. He came into this world to die for you, to do something that you cannot do for yourself. He rose again 3 days later, and if you will allow him to be your Lord, then the promise for you is that he will save you, and you can receive the greatest gift of all, himself. He will give you himself. And that's my desire for you tonight, in the midst of every season, that you would know you can still have joy because you have Jesus. So I'm going to invite Corey up here. We're going to sing a final song, and this is going to be our time of response. And maybe you're here tonight, and you would say that you've given your life to Jesus already, but you have to admit to yourself that you've been focused on all the seasons instead of on God himself. You've been focused on the seasons of your life instead of on Jesus. And maybe you would just have to admit that you're finding joy in the joyful seasons of your life instead of in Jesus. Or maybe you would say you're lacking joy in the difficult seasons of life because you're not focusing on Jesus. And so tonight I would just encourage you, as we sing this last song, refocus your heart, refocus your attention off of the things of this world, off of the seasons of this life, and back onto Jesus. But maybe you're here and you would say you have never given your life to Christ. You have never made that decision to allow Jesus to be the Lord of your life, but you want to make that decision. You are ready to make that decision. You are ready to ask him to forgive you, to make him the Lord of your life. Not simply because I want you to, but because you know that Jesus is the Lord and you need him to save you. If that's you tonight, if you've never given your life to Christ, but you are ready to make that decision to do that, I'm going to be at the back of the room. We'll have other leaders at the back of the room. You can come and grab one of us, pray with us, and tonight can be the night that you receive the greatest gift of all that you receive, Jesus. Stand with me right now and let's pray together.
I hope that you were encouraged by this message today, and I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like more information about our student ministry, if you need prayer, or if you'd like to make a decision to make Jesus the Lord of your life, head on over to fbcwatauga.org/students, scroll down towards the bottom of that page, and you'll see a place that you can send me a message directly. My desire is that you would experience the difference that Jesus makes in your life this week.